Law enforcement from across Maine gathered in Augusta at the state's Law Enforcement Memorial to honor fallen officers and their families. The ceremony honored the 88 fallen officers. Each of their names were read today, and Governor Mills spoke at the event saying every person on the monument had their own story, but what brought them together was their service and dedication to their state. Public Safety Commissioner Michael Soschuk says he is thankful there have not been additional names added to the memorial since Deputy Luke Gross, who died in 2021 after he was struck by a vehicle while investigating a crash in Trenton.
We're very proud of the work that the officers do, that the training that they receive, the support that they receive at the local and state level, to say the least. But the reality is that there are folks that are on the list from 1811 to the last few years, and those run the gamut from tragic accidents to felonious assaults and shots fired and everything across the entire continuum. So those things can happen anywhere, and we've certainly seen some things happen in Maine, whether it's Bowdoin and Yarmouth most recently, that these things do impact every state in the country. So we ask our officers to be careful, and we try to wrap them up with as much support as we can.
Soschuk says 64 law enforcement officers are graduating this Friday and will start their journey soon. The Maine Law Enforcement Memorial was dedicated on May 25, 1991 by the Maine Chiefs of Police Association.